Welcome to the Cannabis Investor Series, as we present a first-hand look into the rapidly evolving cannabis industry and the opportunities that lie ahead.
Thanks for tuning in. I'm Neil Mull. I represent the Canadian Securities Exchange. And as part of our Cannabis Investor Series for 2021, you are watching a small talk on the culture of consumption. And today I have with me Emma Andrews. Emma is the Director of Marketing with Nextleaf Solutions Limited. Nextleaf obviously trades on the Canadian Securities Exchange, and the company develops patented technology for distilling and extracting THC and CBD for the wholesale market. Emma, thank you so much for your time. How are you?
Really appreciate it. Thanks, Anil. I'm doing well.
Great. It's really nice to sit across from you virtually for now and be able to catch up after what feels like a very long time.
It does. A bit of a pause, but yeah, happy to be here with you. You always bring such a great energy to our interviews.
Right back at you, Emma. So why don't we begin? Talk to our viewers about Nextleaf Solutions. What is the company's history and vision?
So we began toll processing, which is still our business model, but actually through a mobile lab that would go to client and partner sites to process. Very quickly, we realized we wanted to exceed the capacity of what we were capable of doing out of our mobile lab and have built out a state-of-the-art facility in Coquitlam, where we're able to process tenfold what we were through the mobile. This efficiency is allowing us to produce a low-cost molecule, which I'm sure we'll get into a little bit more, is a key driver in the market right now. So our toll processing facility is custom built for ethanol-based extraction and the derivative products that can be made from premium high-purity distillate.
Got it. So the facility that you have, you mentioned it's based in Coquitlam, BC, if I'm not wrong?
Yeah.
And you guys, as a company, have global IP, a global IP patent portfolio. There's about 70 patents that you guys have been granted. I think there's over 50 that are pending. Can you talk to us a little bit about the journey that the company and team had to go through to achieve such milestones?
Absolutely. And it's no small feat to have that breadth of portfolio. It spans across multiple types of products, as well as the processes behind the production of the ingredients that go into those products. For an update on kind of the live count, because it is always changing. And even as the director of marketing, sometimes I lose count. So definitely head to our website, nextleafsolutions.com, where we keep track of also the countries that they've been issued in. Positions us really well for global expansion as those opportunities arise. But it's also a reflection of the type of innovation that we're capable of. And that's something we're really, really proud of. We are Canada's most innovative processor by way and validated by the breadth of portfolio of patents that we have. Some of them are for the process of producing distillate. Our refinement, extraction, and purification goes above and beyond what other processors are doing. And this is not only in terms of efficiency, but also the quality and purity that we're able to achieve as an output. That was our first patent issued, was on the actual process to produce our distillate. And that's probably one that we are most proud of because it's really positioned us as a competitor, a strong competitor in the processing niche, able to produce, a really high purity distillate. Not all processes are created equal, and we can get into the nuances a little bit, but it's something that I'm really passionate about, making sure consumers and retailers are aware of what goes on behind the scenes and what that means in terms of our consumption.
Exactly. So here we are talking about the culture of consumption. And, it might seem a little out of the box having a company like Nextleaf on here at first thought, because it's like, well, they don't have any edibles, they don't have any, vapes or anything like that. But you guys and your technology is so important to the players that are creating these products. When the most three common ways of consuming cannabis, obviously inhaling, ingestion, topicals, and all three of those common ways of ingesting it require some sort of an extract that you guys come into play with.
Totally.
Now the company also has such a very a diverse network, I should say, and team members that you guys have put together over the last few years. So obviously there's a great corporate culture that the team at Nextleaf has. Can you talk to us a little bit about how you guys went about to create this atmosphere?
I think we're a team of Swiss Army knives, that's for sure.
Good way to put it.
I really admire my colleagues. We are seasoned veterans of the industry, trailblazers, each in their own right. In part, that comes from really credible academic backgrounds. We have a number of PhD chemists that are surrounding our technology team and able to produce the patents that we've achieved. But then also just a really strong breadth of expertise coming from inside the industry who have joined Nextleaf. So a number of large LPs, we've been able to poach really valuable team members for our production and operations team. So I'm super proud, and it goes at all levels of the organization, everything from Dr. Sherry Boudram on our board of directors, representing from CanDelta, who we worked with for our licensing, Dr. Krupal Paul, who is on our engineering team. She comes from the oil sands industry as an example. Tom Ulanowski, who heads our quality assurance and regulatory affairs, coming previously from Canna Farms, and literally the list can go on. So the experience that we bring to the table and the expertise combined has really allowed us to have not only the innovation that we've been able to pump out on the ingredient side, but you'll see soon it allows us to help our partners with a speed to market advantage. And we'll get into a little bit of the nuances of that has to do with some of the licensing we've been able to achieve.
Well, I kind of wanted to get into that next. Obviously, rapid emulsion technology. I want you to talk to our listeners and viewers about RET, rapid emulsion technology. What is it? Because a lot of people might not fully understand it. And how does that play a part in all of these patents that the company has been able to put together? And give us some of the pros, the good and the bad.
Absolutely. So I'll step back one level before we create our emulsified cannabinoids, which is the correct way, if you will, of saying water soluble. So just to put that to bed, it's not water soluble. It's not an accurate term within the realm of cannabinoid ingredients. So an emulsified cannabinoid is what truly disperses properly into water, hence why we've called it rapid emulsion technology. Prior to creating that molecule, you need distillate. So distillate is the primary output of our extraction process. Distillate can be put into products themselves like vapes or bottled oils, but distillate can also be transformed into an emulsified molecule. And that's what our rapid technology does, is allows that molecule, oil, to be perfectly dispersed into water.
Interesting. And then so that would probably, not probably, that affects then the dosage and all that stuff. Is that correct?
The dosage, the consumption experience, but most notably the onset time. So if you were to drink distillate in water, which wouldn't be a desirable consumption experience, oil does not go into water very easily unless there's some heating that you might do or cook with it as an example, but it's not as approachable to the end consumer. You definitely want that rapid onset time. You want that homogeneity when you put it into a beverage as an example. So having it in this emulsified molecule makes it much easier to work with from a product development standpoint. You can use this molecule in a variety of formulations. From ready to drinks to concentrates as an example, and even in topicals. So it's easier to work with. It is easier to validate stability as well. This is a key for Health Canada in improving your formulations.
Yeah.
It's a much smaller microscopic amount of the droplet.
Interesting. And is there, what I wanted to say is it obviously is a lot more complicated and a lot more procedures involved than you and your friends getting together and trying to cook with cannabis at home.
I love it. You could with distillate. It's not as easy to disperse in a recipe though. So if you think about when you add things like sugar even is easily dissolved into the liquids when you add it in a recipe. Distillate, not so much. So I believe that we're going to start seeing more desire for whether it's powders or concentrates that the consumer can DIY with at home. But convenience is king. So I think a lot of consumers really are going to still desire ready to drink options if it's a beverage category offering or edibles that have that rapid onset, because they're really looking for quick feedback, right? They really want to know that it's working, that it takes effect. You're not taking cannabis to wait for 2 hours. You want to take cannabis and enjoy your experience as quickly as possible.
Yeah, no, very correctly said. So what are some of the challenges that you feel companies might face? Companies like yourself, obviously, your partners, and then obviously consumers when it comes to this sort of ecosystem.
Yeah. With rapid emulsion tech specifically, I find it is a very nuanced story. So our job is to help our partners, our B2B partners, understand the difference that this ingredient can make in terms of their speed to market. And a big part of that is the stability. So we don't use a lot of ingredients that are bound to the cannabinoids to try and make it as layman's as possible. So the cannabinoids are broken down into a much smaller particle size and encapsulated with other ingredients to help stabilize them in water. Other technologies have a multitude of ingredients that sometimes you have to mask with sugar, as an example, or excess flavor, or when they're combined with other ingredients in a formulation like an edible or a beverage, instability can happen through the shelf life verification that you do with any product formulation. So our product allows for greater stability, which allows you to validate the formulations quicker and get your product into market faster. So there's a lot more to dialogue with in terms of the R&D teams that we work with at different partners. And then when those formulations start to hit shelf, to make sure that the retailers understand the difference it can make in terms of onset time, but also in terms of the formulations that this ingredient can be found in. Like I said, they don't have to have as much flavor or sweetener to mask inferior technology. So as this starts to penetrate in the market, I think the consumer is going to realize, wow, that had a rapid onset. It worked. I felt good. I'd want to repeat it. What was in it? Is there other products that have that same efficacy? So I think we'll start to see that tide turn once more consumers are able to access these products.
So obviously, ingredient quality is very important when it comes to consumption, as you allude to. So how does Nextleaf ultimately define quality?
This is a really interesting one. And with a number of my colleagues in the industry, we talk about this avidly, if not weekly, is how do we define quality? Because it's not like the natural products industry, as an example, where you see every package with icons about non-GMO and organic and fair trade and all of these parameters that might aid your product choice based on your own quality standards that you're looking for. Yeah. In this industry, there's kind of no third-party verification just yet that's widespread. So it is up to each individual processor or ingredient provider to help define that. For us, one of the big ones is efficacy, both in terms of how it performs in the formulation, but then also for the end consumer. And then another definition of quality is the purity. So our extraction technology is capable of getting up to 95% purity in our distillate. And as an example, this is produced through ethanol-based extraction. Other forms of extraction technology, such as CO2, may only get to 60, 70, maybe at most 80% purity. So depending on what formulation you're doing, that purity is a really big indicator of quality.
Even if it's at that minimum 10%, like you said, it would, it would make a huge difference when it comes to the end product, I would assume.
Absolutely. If you are familiar with vape cartridges, you'll often notice different coloration in the input in the vape cartridges. So if it's a darker color, as an example, there tends to be more impurities in that cartridge because it's a lower percent purity of cannabis. And the remainder is things like chlorophyll, which can tint the color of the vape cartridge. So at face value, that can be an easy way to determine purity or potency, but also in terms of the quality of the extraction process.
And that comes back to how important it is in that education process to the bud tenders and the retailers that are then passing it over to the consumers. Because as a consumer, you wouldn't really know that stuff unless you are really involved and want to do your own research and homework on the products you're consuming.
Totally. For us as an ingredient provider as well, the other piece is compatibility when you're thinking about quality and the experience of quality. I've seen vape carts personally that I've purchased on the market as part of product research, that the distillate will actually start to seep out of the vape cartridge. Sometimes you can get a really rancid sensation, and that means that the vape hardware isn't working properly with the viscosity of the distillate that's placed into that cartridge. So the compatibility even of your hardware and your ingredients is super important to verify as part of the quality experience. That in part can be through the shelf stability trials, but it can also be through consumption trials, and not all processors have that ability.
Speaking of consumption trials, we will obviously talk a lot about something that you guys have put together as a team and company, and there was a well-written article in Forbes about these trials. So we'll get into that, but there's just so much I want to talk to you about, Emma. I want to talk a little bit about nationally what's happening here in Canada. Obviously we had Cannabis 2.0 that came about a year and a half ago, if I'm around that time, actually a year and a half ago. We were here locally then allowed to not only have legal flower and bud, but beverages and consumption. We started with extracts.
Yeah.
And hopefully are soon going more and more into the edibles and that side of things. Can you talk to us a little bit about what happened there and where we are right now in Cannabis 2.0?
Yes, definitely. So a lot of those products require dedicated or unique manufacturing facilities to produce. So speaking, for the industry on whole, a lot of the challenges are getting these facilities licensed in order to manufacture and produce these products. Earlier, before the second wave of legalization took place, there was a lot of anticipation from investors and companies to be the first to market. And everyone quickly realized that's not the metric to go after. Speed to market is more important. So as soon as you get your license, the ability to execute, or as soon as you validated a formula, the ability to get it into market. So you don't necessarily have to be the first beverage or the first edible or the first topical on the market to steal or corner that market share. You need to make sure that you can quickly turn based on your licensing advantages, and the ability to get product in market, I would say, is one of the biggest challenges we all face, partly because there's provincial variations from province to province in their call cycle for products, their approval process, the sheer volume of products submitted, depending on how popular that province is in terms of footprint or consumer base. So that's been a huge challenge. And then, case in point, the pandemic. This happened right in the middle of this second wave of legalization, and it's really challenged a lot of us just in terms of operations in the early days of the pandemic. And then, I really do feel for our retailers and how they're able to tell the story of these products and the ingredients that go into them. So certainly a lot of challenges, but we're here for it. That's why we're in cannabis, right? We're not averse to a challenge. So
absolutely. So I'm going to ask you, Emma, as someone who's on the inside of the cannabis industry, not strictly from Nextleaf, but just overall, how has the industry and the community adapted to these challenges?
I think a lot more advocacy for e-commerce for sure. And that's even just personal anecdote that I recommend a lot of people go to the provincial distribution e-commerce platforms where they'll see the widest breadth of products. So if you're navigating it yourself, you want to know what your options are rather than be really limited and assume that's all the options you have. So e-commerce obviously has taken a big front seat in this whole equation of accessing cannabis for sure. But I also think just the stringency in protocol to produce the product has leveled up. Health Canada has such strict regulations around the production of cannabis to begin with, and now we have sanitation on top of that for pandemic prevention reasons. So it's just meant a little bit more, I don't want to say paperwork for the sake of paperwork, but procedures in terms of how we operate at the facility, the number of people we can have on site. As an example, our corporate team has had to get really innovative in how we network. And you and I were chatting a little bit about this. There's not the same industry networking where you would get to learn and rub shoulders with all of your peers. And that's a lot of where innovation can come from, is that idea sharing and problem solving, joint problem solving. I think as much as we're all competitors, we're also willing to help one another rise. Yes. So we've really missed out on that, but I think we've really pivoted in this virtual age. And not only do brands have a little more ownership to get the message out there, but for brands to recommend where to find all that information, whether it's through them or an e-commerce platform, and then to seek out your own connections. Again, whether you're a consumer, whether you're a retailer, or whether you're a licensed B2B provider, I think really leveraging your network and not being afraid of making these connections virtually.
I think it's fair to say the entrepreneurs in the cannabis community definitely live by, if there's a will, there's a way.
Totally. I think we are a very driven, resilient bunch. And like I said, I don't think challenge scares any of us off. So it's just another challenge in the mix
to get past. So I wanted to talk a little bit. I know we talked briefly about the patents that you guys have accumulated that are pending still to be granted to the company. This is something that a lot of people probably just put past them because you're getting patents and you're getting them granted. But you and I were talking offline. How important is it to protect, as a company, to protect these patents that are being, or this technology that's being granted these patents?
Yeah, patents are only as valuable as your ability to commercialize it or to defend it. So when we're looking at should we submit a patent, those are kind of the two verifications: is what might that do to aid or limit us in commercializing it, or how challenging it may be to defend that patent. As an example, our rapid emulsion technology is very unique. This is a very hot button type of technology in the industry right now. We don't want to reveal all of our trade secrets around this. And part of applying for a patent is revealing how you do what you do. So this is one ingredient where we've decided to step back on applying for a patent and keep it very close to our chest at this time. Of course, due diligence with partners, we get into the weeds on how we do it. But for the forward-facing version of it, we're going to keep it close to our chest. Certainly, you can read a little bit about it on our website in terms of the basic molecular structure. If anyone's really keen to get in a bit deeper, that will explain a little bit more about the types of particles that are in this emulsion technology. So we definitely want to help educate people, but without giving away all of our trade secrets.
Of course, you got to keep that recipe close.
It's interesting. It's a competitive advantage, right? And there are only so many people who can commercialize with that technology based on licensing, based on manufacturing capabilities, based on the volumes they're looking to do. So at this stage in the game, we just want to be really careful about that information.
Yeah, because not many of the general public or even investors would put two and two together, that as a technology company, a cannabis company, but focused on the technology side of it, you guys really have to protect what you guys are building. So I wanted to kind of talk about that a little bit and just get your thoughts. So obviously that is a concern that you guys have and are paying close attention to.
Yeah. And like I said, commercialization of the IP is really our main goal. So acquiring patents isn't the be all and end all for our business, proposition. A big part of it is making sure we get these ingredients into market and that the technology actually has a chance to shine.
Emma, you mentioned that, obviously when it comes to the partners you're working with, you guys will let them know how the technology works, even though it's a guarded thing. Are you able to talk about some of your partners?
So some are announced, some are not announced. We have partners from coast to coast who are consumer-facing producers. So they would have their sales amendment and the ability to take product to market. The model that we work with them on is a toll processing model. And under this model, that means we would take their biomass, we would process it into distillate, and either we would take some of that distillate as payment and can leverage that in different ways, or we would take top line revenue when that distillate is converted into products or used in other ways. So like I said, from coast to coast, some partners prefer to keep this secret. So we certainly don't announce them all, though I wish we could. Definitely products you have seen in market and can sample in market, but there may come a time when we're able to reveal a little bit more.
Got it. Well, I'm sure our viewers will have to go over to your website and sign up for your press releases.
Hey, there you go. We have actually a fantastic email that we put out called Refined Insights, and it is exactly that. It's where a lot of the insider knowledge gets shared with our investor community, things that, even though there's age gates on websites, we still keep some things, to a bit of a more intimate audience. So yeah, I would highly encourage checking that out.
Absolutely. So I now want to talk a little bit about something that the company, well, you guys always have news out, first of all, but something recently, there was an article written up by Amanda Siebert. She is a cannabis author, activist. She wrote this article for Forbes magazine that was titled "I Got High for Science." It was to do with human trials that Nextleaf has announced.
Exactly. I laugh at the article title because that's such, we call it clickbait, right? That would get someone to read it, but it was exactly that. We brought her into our facility to participate in our human trials. After getting to know her a little bit, the team's known her for a while, but after, bringing her into the fold and sharing a little bit more about our technology, in the midst of chatting with her, we received our human trials amendment on our research and development license. So this allows us to do in-house focus groups, which seems very basic or obvious as part of consumer packaged goods development. But this type of license amendment really isn't widely spread throughout the industry. So it's a very unique lever for us. And we've had groups anywhere from 5 to 10, partly due to COVID reasons, but partly to keep the sample size nice and cohesive, if you will. And truly, we can test any of our ingredients in formulation. So rapid emulsion technology, our vapes using our distillate as an example. And it's really essential to make sure you have a desirable consumption experience and that compatibility with hardware. Like I mentioned, stability was something we could validate all along, but it's a completely different experience when you ingest something or inhale something. So allows us to, tweak formulations a little bit, tweak flavor profiles a little bit, and get a bit of a pulse on, would you repeat consuming this? Would you recommend it to someone else? So a lot of qualitative metrics that we're able to gather.
I think calling it sort of like a focus group, as you mentioned, really puts it into perspective on what it's like. And it's just really interesting. So you guys just recently got this amended approval for it. You've started it. How long do you intend these trials to go for?
In perpetuity. It's absolutely something that will aid our ongoing innovation process. And the biggest way we've executed so far is with our partners. So when their biomass is processed, we can work with them on the finished products. They'll take that verification in terms of the consumption experience or the quality back to their teams and create SOPs or procedures and specs around how to produce that repeatably in-house. So they're coming to us for the consumption experience validation and taking those learnings back to their team to manufacture and take to market. So it's a huge value add for our partners, a differentiator across other service providers that they may be evaluating. And to be honest, it's a really enjoyable experience, as I'm sure you can imagine, but it's a great relationship builder as well. It's something we hope to be able to bring retailers in-house to do so they can see, as we were talking about, what does it mean to consume a 90% purity distillate vape cart compared to an 80%, not just in look. It's quite meaningful.
Because most people go by the look of the packaging.
Which is ridiculous, as we all know, right? You can't see the end product. So that's what's so wild about it is a lot of companies are only able to verify once they've purchased it in the market. So we're seeing recalls or returns back at retail from the consumer saying, this isn't what I expected, or it's not delivering on promise. And that feeds back into the producers as well when that product gets returned. It hits their bottom line. So it's really important to get it right early on in the production process.
I love it. I can't wait to read, hear, watch more on what you and your team at Nextleaf do. Emma, I've really enjoyed this conversation, first of all, because it's not only opened my eyes on the different formats of the technology that goes into extracting cannabis and getting it ready for consumption. But I want to end off with, what has the shareholder sentiment been? Actually, there's two things I want to end off with. One is, what has the shareholder sentiment been like from your investors throughout your journey so far?
Very positive. I'd say there's always eagerness to understand how we pivot with just changes in the market or changes in the economy. So a big one lately has been trying to understand how we are going to continue to have multiple revenue streams as more players enter the market with consumer packaged goods that are traditional processors. So as an example, we are exploring what it could look like to have a B2C strategy as Nextleaf, because our shareholders and investors, want to try the product that they've invested in, and how does that happen, or what does that look like, but also ensure the long-term viability of Nextleaf. So that's certainly something we're avidly looking at for our future.
Got it. Now, for my second part, might be a little bit of a personal opinion from you, but obviously we're here talking about cannabis, we're here talking about the corporate angle of it, and we're here talking about culture, which is right up there when it comes to cannabis. So what does cannabis and corporate and culture mean to you? What are the crossroads there?
I think for me, and I'll give a little bit of a personal anecdote in the midst of answering this. I'm a mom, I'm an athlete. So for me, it's really important to destigmatize cannabis But the accessibility and the variety of products that we have available, I think, allows a wider breadth of consumer to come into the category. I deeply believe that there's a form of cannabis that is right for everyone, and it's not going to be flower for everyone. So as much as, I'm a bit of a purist for the plant because I have a bit of a green thumb. I love gardening. I love the green stuff, but the derivative products made with extracted cannabinoids are going to be much more accessible on a widespread basis. And I'm really interested to watch the shift from, it's still happening, from legacy into legit, as we say, or into the legal market. And a big part of that is driven by price compression. So we see a lot more value priced product appearing in the market now to help that consumer really make the legal choice much easier.
Well said, Emma. And I think on that note, it's a perfect way to wrap this up. But before I do that, I want you to make sure that our viewers and audience know where they can go follow you guys or find more information on your technology and team.
Thanks. Yeah, nextleafsolutions.com, easy to remember, but I highly encourage you to subscribe for Refined Insights, which is our insiders email that we send out on a monthly basis. Lots of really interesting things that come out of the labs. You get to see firsthand some behind the scenes footage from our production site, any new press releases or announcements that we send out. And you never know, maybe we'll be soliciting investors for a focus group one day. So sign up there if you're interested in joining us, and stay tuned.
Phones are ringing right now.
Right.
Emma, it's always a pleasure when I get a chance to talk to your team and yourself. I want to thank, obviously Paul, Jason, Ryan, the rest of everybody that's been involved to help set up this conversation. And thank you very much for your time.
Onwards. Yeah, we'll talk again soon.
This is the Cannabis Investor Series.